believe it or not, this show can make sense sometimes, John, and we'll segue nicely into a draft profile in just a second. Just want to remind all of our live listeners, whether you're new to the program or not, please try and join us live. We don't normally record at this time, but special evening full of coverage on the Cincy Jungle podcast channel. But if you can join us for every live recording on our YouTube channel, on cincyjungle.com and Cincy Jungle's Facebook page. If not, you can download the audio recording on your favorite audio streaming platform, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, any of those. We're on all the major ones. And then, of course, our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's a little icon right under John's left shoulder there. Yeah, click that bad boy and you get notified when we go live via video, and or subscribe to all of those our podcast channels so you know when new material from our show, from Orange is the New Black, from Chalk Talk, all that stuff is live for you to consume. John, well, the Bengals may not go offensive line at number 5 if I end up being a nice soothsayer and looking in my crystal ball and predicting Jamar Chase there. But we talked a little bit last week on our mock draft about Alex Leatherwood, a tackle that could theoretically be there and should theoretically be there in round 2 based on projections. Seems like a nice piece for the team, a guy who could play guard and then kick out to tackle later on, theoretically, going forward, and a guy that the Bengals could be very interested in, being from Alabama. But there's another name that could be a top round 2, and that is Notre Dame's Liam Eichenberg, a guy who has a lot of starting experience at left tackle, has a lot of good film, and a guy who probably could be a good player for the Cincinnati Bengals on the offensive line going forward. So I've got some stuff, some notes. I reviewed some film. I saw some other things. I know you have some thoughts on him as well, so we'll kind of go back and forth on this. But I'll kick it off with some of the things that I found and saw with Liam Eichenberg and how he may or may not fit with the Cincinnati Bengals, at least this year or the years ahead. So here is one. By the way, if you're on Twitter, you don't follow this guy's account, please do so. He has a really cool account, especially this time of year. Kentley Platt at Math Bomb. So if you look at, he does these, it's the relative athletic score. He kind of takes a lot of different composite data, but from workouts and size and all of these at all different kinds of position groups. And you can see here it dates all the way back to 1987. So at Math Bomb, go check him out, especially this time of year. Go follow him because it's a really cool thing. But you see here 8.53, and the composite agility grade is great. The bench, of course, I know Paul Alexander is no longer the Bengals coach, but the bench is a high thing there. Good size. You see a little over 6 feet, a little over 300 pounds. Not great on the vertical jump. Broad jump's okay. And then some other good, like I said, great agility grades there. So as you see here, this was interesting to me. The 8.53 RAS out of a possible 10 was 166th out of 1,124 offensive tackles from 87 to 21. So pretty good. Not something to leap out of your chair about necessarily, but it's worth noting. And that's some of the stuff that you see on film, or at least I saw on film. I saw a pretty good athlete, not a great one. I saw a guy who does things. He's kind of just solid across the board. And that's great for the Cincinnati Bengals, who need long-term help at tackle. And this could be your right tackle of the future. The concern there, speaking of right tackle, is there's not a lot of snaps from him from the right. He's had a few. I saw some snaps at right tackle from him, but he was primarily their left tackle and replaced Mike McGlinchey after he left for the NFL and started all the games there for the Irish after McGlinchey left. Now, again, kind of going on a con that I have, and speaking of McGlinchey's a bit bigger, about 6'8", and in the 3 teens. You saw there, but I think 6'6", 302 or so for Eichenberg, but still a lot of good stuff here. And I'm gonna play some clips here via Twitter that I found that were also just kind of little clips off of other film that I watched from him, but I thought that they would help some people see some of the things that I am talking about here. So this is from blitz analytics. But if you see here, watch the circle. He's in pass pro. He gets a little bit of a bull rush against him there. I didn't really like that one. There was one here from our buddy Blake Jewell of all Bengals, John. I'll put this one up here as well. He likes Eichenberg as a Bengals target here, so check this out. It is off TV here, so a little grainy there, but you can see here he's pretty stout, right? Just kind of holds his ground in this one. Doesn't let the defender get to do much of anything. So I like that one. And then one of the things that I noticed, and not necessarily in these that I'm sharing, but one of the things I noticed quite a bit in the run blocking aspect, a lot of movement up to the and effectiveness at the second level. A lot of second level stuff where he got up and knocked out a linebacker, knocked out some others up the field a bit to spring big plays. So those are some of the things that I saw, and some of those clips are available on Twitter and whatnot. But again, just kind of solid across the board, solid athlete, not spectacular, solid across the board in terms of what he does. I think he has the ability to be a pretty good pro for a team for years, but not necessarily a perennial Pro Bowl type of guy.
And I think that solid, good, not great overall profile is what will allow him to be there sometime on day 2 for the Bengals to target. Like, people are so worried that if the Bengals go chase, that there's going to be this magical run on offensive linemen and 10 or 15 guys are going to be off the board in the first 37 picks. But I don't think Eichenberg is going to be one of them. I think if the Bengals are interested, they will get a shot at him, because you're right. He doesn't have incredible athleticism. He doesn't have these wild physical traits. It doesn't really wow you in terms of on-field play, but he just gets the job done. I think PFF had him as one of their most stable pass blocking offensive linemen, and that's what you kind of come to expect from guys at Notre Dame. Like, for years, I know Harry Heiston, the offensive line coach, is no longer there, but they just pump out good offensive linemen. It's just like Iowa and Wisconsin. Like, those guys are NFL ready, and he, like you said, he's not necessarily this physical specimen, not like Mike McGlinchey, who he replaced when McGlinchey was drafted by the 49ers in 2018, but he's just a solid player. I think what is a little bit concerning, though, the lack of arm length. It might be a little bit under the Bengals threshold. He, I believe, measured in with 32.5-inch arms, which to them is most likely a guard. I don't think they would have that type of player at tackle long-term. Also, the middling athleticism, it does make you wonder if he is a fit in a wide scheme zone. But that's also an interesting point too, because courtesy of Pro Football Focus in their advanced data, Notre Dame ran like 60% of zone in terms of run plays and only like 30% of gap style runs, which is like not what the Bengals do. So the Bengals are more zone oriented, and Eichenberg's zone block or run blocking grade was in the 90s this year, was like its best overall year run blocking. And that was the same year that they switched to more zone. So that kind of bodes well for fitting what they want in terms of how he produced. But also, I think just being an average athlete, it's not ideal, I guess, if you want to have guys, in that zone blocking scheme, getting up to the second level. But like you said, he's not going to lose like tremendously, and it's not going to lose often. It's just a matter of, is he going to be effective, I guess, against superior athletes? And is he going to survive on the edge if they keep him at tackle with less than ideal arm length? I think his technique is fine to overcome that. And like you said, I think he's just a solid player who doesn't have a lot of weaknesses. So with all that in mind, like if he's there in rounds 2, or even if he drops to round 3, because he just doesn't wow you, and he just exists, and there's other more promising guys that are drafted above him, he might interest the Bengals. I guess the one thing to note, though, is that Notre Dame had its pro day today, and Frank Pollock was not in attendance as one of the offensive line coaches. So, I mean, Eichenberg is not the only Notre Dame offensive line prospect in this class. So the fact that Pollock wasn't there at all, it may or may not be telling that, they just aren't really interested. But, it's not an end-all type of thing. They could just know a lot about him and just not want to see him in person. So, yeah, if he's there and they would like to address offensive line at that point in the draft, I think he has to be someone that they look at. Speaking of Frank Pollock, Roy York in our live Facebook chat says, is Liam better than the tackle at USC? Well, Frank Pollock was on hand and doing the drills with Elijah Vera Tucker at USC's pro day, was very interested in that, or seemingly interested in that player and those drills there. So, take that for what you will. Liam is not
I wouldn't say Eichenberg is a better offensive lineman prospect in this draft than Vera Tucker, but it depends on how you view Vera Tucker. If you're more in line with him being a guard or a tackle, a lot of people seem to like Vera Tucker much more as a guard than a tackle. This is the thing with Eichenberg, and this is what I'm not quite sure about. You mentioned the potential shorter arms and all of that. There's not really a track record. Leatherwood had a little experience at guard and then played tackle, right? That's not the track record here. So I don't know if Eichenberg, especially early, if you're going to say, hey, this is the guy we can plug in at guard and let him be groomed maybe to replace Reef in a year or two. I don't know how effective that will be because there's not, to my knowledge, I didn't see a lot of guard stuff from Eichenberg. I saw a little bit of right tackle snaps, primarily mostly on the left side.
Right. And every offensive line position is different. I don't want to be the guy that says it doesn't matter, you can play whatever. But I also think that, if you're playing left tackle at Notre Dame and you spend an entire offseason, working at a different position for the NFL, I think he could be able to do that just because technique wise and just from a technical standpoint, he's just solid. He doesn't have anything that strikes you as that's going to be a problem. He doesn't bend at the waist that much. He doesn't end up on the ground. Both things were really prevalent with Billy Price at Ohio State. He has some limitations from an athleticism standpoint and from a physical standpoint, but I think he works well with those. And he doesn't have anything that evaluators and scouts are going to be like, that's an issue. We don't want to invest in that early. But at the same time, those limitations kind of make him less desirable. But that could work for the Bengals' favor. Even if they aren't tremendously high on him, I think if he's available a little bit later than what people expect, just because there are more high upside tackles in this class, he's a target.
I think so as well. It's just, where do you play him right away? And is this what you don't want? I mean, ideally, you want guys that you draft in the high rounds. You want them to come in, plug, play, and be effective for you right away. Again, he very well could come in and play a guard position and be effective right away. Maybe that's his trajectory based on the arm length in general in the NFL. But ideally, you want him to go and play, right? If you're going to take him at the top of round 2, say, you want this guy to play right away and be effective for you. And, if it's a position that he's not overly familiar with, I don't know. A lot of accolades, a lot of awards for this kid. One of the best offensive linemen in college football as of last year. So there's a lot to like. It's just a matter of how high is the ceiling with this guy? Where do you play him right away? Those are some of my immediate concerns.
Right. And I think because he's not, he doesn't fit all their thresholds for a tackle, if they draft him, they might just draft him as a guard, just full time. If that's the plan, they stick to it and they just commit to it, then it could definitely work out. Also, I think just it's an overarching type of thing to look out for now, because a lot of these tackles, when they're measuring in at their pro days, they don't have the elite arm length. I think Leatherwood is one of the few exceptions in this entire class. For a lot of these guys have 33-inch arms or less. And especially for Frank Pollock, I think for the most part, he has worked with offensive linemen with, very long frames, very long wingspans. That fits guys who have to get laterally really quickly in these wide zone schemes. It's a prerequisite more or less. So that's something to watch for if a lot of these guys just end up being a little bit, shorter, or they don't have as big of arm lengths or wingspans. That's something to look at.
Well, for those who say I only talk about USC prospects, I went with one of USC's biggest rivals and one of the Bengals' biggest needs in terms of offensive line. We thought it was only fair if I was going to say Ja'Marr Chase is going to be the pick at number 5 based on his workout today in our State Your Case, then we got to say, well, let's look at offensive line options at the top of round 2, because there should be some good ones, this kid included, and Leatherwood.
At a rival school of USC, nonetheless. I mean, do you consider Notre Dame a rival of USC just because they play that game?
Yes. Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah. Notre Dame traditionally is a big, it's weird though, because they're not in the same conference, right? So
how did that start though? I just know it's a story.
Long time ago. Here, let's sit back and do a history. No, I'm not going to do that. But long time ago, the two teams clashed quite a bit and in some very big games. And so there's been some kind of iconic college football games between the two teams, storied history between both both teams, obviously. But yeah, Eichenberg is a guy to keep your eye on. May not be, the most exciting or best offensive line prospect in the entire class, but he is a good one, a solid one. I think John and I can agree on that one there, and could be a target for the Bengals based on what their projections are. And I find it interesting what you said about their thresholds and what the Bengals usually like in terms of some of the measurables and stuff. So that's something to definitely continue to monitor.